Way back in 1998, when I was 11 and in 6th grade, something happened that still gives me chills. After school, Sarah and I always waited on the bench by the library, in view of the office and pickup lane. That Thursday, my mom paged me. Yeah, pager era. Saying she'd be 20 minutes late and to wait at the usual spot. Sarah's mom pulled up, asked if she was coming, and Sarah told her she'd stay with me. Her mom said okay and drove off. We went back to complaining about lunch drama and a pop quiz. It felt routine, safe. He walked up in a full suit with a portfolio and a photo badge. He introduced himself as a Life Touch rep and said there was an issue with my family's photo order. I didn't remember us ordering anything, but my parents handled that stuff, so I kept quiet. He crouched to our level and asked, "You're Emily Carter, right?" Hearing my name startled me into nodding. He opened the portfolio and showed a printed sheet with my last name and our home address. It felt legit and made my stomach tighten. He said there'd been a payment error and he needed a parent's signature on a corrected form. "The paperwork's in my car," he added, motioning toward the lot. "Walk over with me and we'll be done in a minute." I shifted to stand. Sarah grabbed my wrist and whispered, "No." This is weird. I sat back down. The parking lot was nearly empty by then. Most parents were gone and the library lights were switching off. If he worked for the photo company, why not go through the office? Why ask two kids to walk to his car? I told him my mom would be there soon and he could talk to her. His smile dropped a notch. "It'll take 1 minute," he said, checking his watch like we were causing trouble. "I have other stops." There was an edge now that hadn't been there. Sarah said louder, "We're not allowed to leave school grounds without a parent or teacher." That was the rule. We'd had assemblies about it. He exhaled hard. "This is official school business." "You're making it more complicated than it needs to be." He stepped closer, almost between us and the door, and I saw him glance toward the far end of the lot like he was checking on someone. He set the portfolio on the bench, started talking faster. Backlog, misprint, reship at no charge, and asked me to confirm our address. I didn't. "My mom can confirm," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. Sarah added that our teacher could help him get the office. The friendly act slipped for a beat. "Let's go," he said, sharper. "You won't be in trouble. I'm trying to help you fix your order." He held his hand out in a way that wasn't quite a grab, and my pulse kicked so hard it felt noisy. I realized I'd already given him my name for free. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my pager like it was a phone. "I'll page her," I said. He watched my hands too closely and didn't move toward his car. The lot was quiet. Even the buses were gone. Sarah stood, but angled toward the doors. "We'll wait inside," she said, steady. I followed. He shifted and took a half step that cut across our path. For a second, I thought he might block us. He kept flicking his eyes to the far corner of the lot, jaw tight, like he was on someone else's clock. The front door opened and our teacher, Miss Johnson, came out with her tote bag and a stack of graded worksheets. She looked at him, then at us, then at the portfolio on the bench, and her posture changed. She was the kind of teacher who remembered the rules. She'd also given us that "don't leave with strangers" talk more than once after a weird incident the previous year. She walked toward us, not fast, but with purpose. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Her tone was suspicious, like she could tell something was wrong. He switched back to friendly like a flip. "Hi, ma'am," he said to Miss Johnson, all polite. "I'm with the photo company, just following up on orders. Since you're here, I'll circle back another day when parents are around." He didn't wait for her reply. He picked up his portfolio, turned on his heel, and walked fast toward a dark blue sedan at the far end. He got in and pulled out so quick Miss Johnson didn't get a word in. She stared after him, then turned to us with that tight look teachers get when something isn't right. What did he want? We told her everything. Name, address on a printed sheet, the story about a payment issue, his push to get us to his car. Her face went hard. She took out her phone and called the principal, then the police. "You're staying with me," she said. And we did. About 10 minutes later, my mom arrived, confused at the sight of us inside the lobby with Miss Johnson. She hugged me too tight and kept asking, "Who was he? Why didn't the office call me?" The police got there after, took us to the conference room, and Miss Johnson gave them the partial plate she'd memorized and the car description. Dark blue sedan, older model, dent on the rear door. They wrote everything down, asked us to repeat it slower, and had us sign our statements. An officer walked the lot and checked the cameras, but the cameras didn't face that corner. By the time they left, the sun was down and the building was quiet. That evening, the principal called my mom again. He'd reached the photo company. No one was scheduled to visit the school. Later, my dad spoke to someone at LifeTouch who said they never send reps to approach students after school. All orders, issues, everything goes through the office. The word "never" stuck with me. My mom sat at the table with the cordless phone and a legal pad, writing names and times, her hand shaking. I kept seeing the man's smile drop when we said no. On Monday, the school held an emergency assembly. We were told to sit by homeroom and listen. The principal explained the situation without using our names, but everyone knew. Kids kept looking over at us because they'd seen the cops on Thursday. He talked about rules we already knew, but hadn't thought about since the last drill. If an adult wants you to go somewhere, you don't. If someone says they're official, you ask the office to verify. He told us the police were involved and that our parents would get an email with safety steps. I remember the gym feeling smaller than usual because everyone was quiet. The police followed up that afternoon with my parents. A detective spoke calmly, like he'd done this a lot. He said people pretend to be from trusted places, schools, churches, teams, to get kids to comply. They pick after-school times because routines make it easier. The printed sheet with my name and address meant he'd done some kind of homework. Maybe he got it from old directories, maybe from trash, maybe from mail. The detective said the partial plate and car description were helpful, but not enough by themselves. That part hit my mom hard. She pressed him on what else we could have done. He said we'd done the right things, said no, stayed by the building, involved an adult, documented what we could. Police didn't find him. They checked similar reports in nearby districts and asked the photo company to alert schools. Nothing matched well enough. For a couple weeks, my parents took turns picking me up from the office door. No more bench. My mom started double-checking the locks and watched the street longer than before. At night, she'd ask me to run through the exact words again, like maybe a detail would help. I started carrying a little notebook to write plates or descriptions if I ever needed to. Sarah and I walked together whenever we could, and we kept our heads up more. I'm 36 now, and I still think about how fast it switched from normal to not. I remember the suit, the tie, the way he watched the lot like he was waiting for a signal. I remember Sarah squeezing my wrist hard enough to stop me, and Miss Johnson stepping out at the exact moment we needed an adult. My mom still says, what if Sarah hadn't been there? And what if Miss Johnson hadn't come out? I don't answer because there isn't a good answer. We did what we were taught, and it mattered. Sarah and I stayed friends through high school and still text sometimes. Whenever we bring it up, we land on the same thing. Her instinct to keep me seated probably saved my life. My name's Marcus Johnson. I'm 17, and this happened last fall at the end of October. It was a regular Tuesday. School had been going for 2 months since summer break. I got home around 4, tossed my backpack by the stairs, knocked out my math worksheet at the kitchen table, and then flopped on the couch to keep watching a show I'd started the night before. My parents were at work like usual. Mom's a hospital administrator, always late. Dad's a long-haul trucker and wasn't due back until the weekend. Being home alone didn't bother me. We've lived on this street my whole life. Around 7, I microwaved a frozen lasagna until it hissed at the edges, ate straight from the plastic tray because I'm lazy, then washed the fork in the tray because if I didn't, Mom would text me a picture of the sink later with a question mark. I checked that the front door was locked out of habit, glanced at the thermostat, it runs cold in the evenings, and went back to the couch. It felt completely normal. Just me, TV noise, the hum from the fridge. If anything was off, it was tiny stuff you'd only notice later, like how the porch light was burnt out, even though I swear it worked on Sunday. Around 7:30, our neighbor's dogs started going nuts. They're usually lazy and sleep behind the fence, but now they were sprinting back and forth, barking like someone had come into the yard. I stood up and parted the living room curtain with 2 fingers. The street looked empty. One parked SUV across from us, a porch light down the block. No people. I waited a few seconds, kind of expecting to catch somebody walking fast between houses. Nothing. The dogs kept at it for maybe a minute, then cut off all at once. I told myself a raccoon must have run the fence line and sat back down. I turned the volume up 2 clicks. About 15 minutes later, there was a loud clatter, metal on concrete, from our garage. It was sharp enough that it overrode the TV. I froze mid-breath. Our garage is attached to the house, but you can only get in from outside through the roll-up door. We never use it as an entrance. I muted the TV and listened. For a few seconds it was dead quiet, and I almost convinced myself the shelving had shifted. Then came a new sound I recognized too well. A toolbox drawer sliding and bumping, then the rattle of loose sockets. Like someone was rummaging in Dad's tools. I stood up slow. My first thought wasn't brave, it was practical. If it was Dad, why would he be home on a Tuesday and not text first? He wouldn't, and he wouldn't be quiet about it either. I walked to the hallway and listened harder. Another shuffle, definitely not in my head. I texted Mom. "Are you home?" My heart was going fast, but my fingers were steady. She answered in under a minute. "No." 2 hours, I typed. "Someone's making noise in the garage." 3 dots. Then immediately, "Lock yourself in your room and call 911. No, are you sure? Or go check. Just instructions." That snapped me into motion. I backed toward the stairs, keeping my eyes on the hallway that leads to the kitchen door. It hit me that the interior door between the house and garage is the one I'm supposed to latch from the inside. Dad makes a big deal about it. Except I hadn't thought about it since the weekend. I didn't go near the kitchen to check. I went up the stairs fast but quiet, shoes barely touching the steps. In my room, I locked the door and slid my desk chair under the knob. Not because I thought it would stop anyone, but because it made me feel less exposed. I dialed 911 and kept my voice low when the dispatcher answered. I said my name, my address, and that I was hearing someone in our garage and I was upstairs alone. She asked if there were any weapons in the house. I said my dad keeps tools, not guns. She asked where I was exactly. Bedroom. Door locked. She told me to stay there. As I was explaining what I'd heard, metal clanging, drawers, I heard the hinge creak from downstairs. It was the door from the garage into the kitchen. I know that sound because it sticks halfway open if you don't push it through. I'd definitely forgotten to latch it. I stopped talking. The dispatcher heard me go quiet and asked if something changed. Heavy footsteps came next, slow and spaced out, like someone testing the floor. I could make out the pattern of the living room, the soft step on the rug, then the firmer step on hardwood by the hall. The person paused. The fridge motor clicked on in the kitchen and masked a scrape. Chair leg, maybe. Then there was the soft thud of a cabinet or drawer. I told the dispatcher in a whisper, "They're inside." My phone felt hot against my ear. I kept waiting to hear the stairs. Instead, I heard a long exhale from below, like whoever it was had been holding their breath too. The dispatcher stayed calm, told me to breathe, asked if I could see the hallway under my door. I said yes, just a sliver. No shadows yet. She said officers were en route, gave me the cross streets so I knew she wasn't guessing, and then said, clear and steady, that police were on their way, about 5 minutes out, to stay on the line. The footsteps started coming up the stairs, slowly, one step at a time. I panicked and looked around my room. The window opened onto the porch roof. I opened it, climbed outside, and lay flat on the shingles. The phone was still at my ear. I heard someone try my bedroom door, then several thuds against it. The wood cracked. Someone came into my room and moved things around. The window scraped wider, and a head poked out. A bearded man in a dark hat, about a foot away from me. He looked down at the yard, then side to side along the porch roof, but not up where I was lying. The dispatcher asked if I could get lower. I whispered that I was as flat as I could get. The man's shoulders wedged into the frame. He planted a knee on the sill and leaned out farther, testing the distance to the roof. He stared straight ahead, then down the gutter line. He never tipped his chin. I could see a loose thread on his sleeve and a nick on the screwdriver handle. If he looked up even an inch, we'd lock eyes. The dispatcher said officers were close. I said, "He's right here," as soft as I could. Inside the room, without turning, he pulled open my desk drawer and rifled through it. He listened toward the street. A text buzzed on my end. "Mom again. They're almost there." The sound made my chest jump. He went still. He said, "Hello?" toward the yard, not loud, like he expected a second person. I bit my tongue and didn't move. He set the screwdriver on the sill and leaned out farther like he might drop to the roof. I pictured his shoe hitting near my hand. It kept me frozen. A car rolled by out front. Headlights slid over the wall and faded. From lower in the house, a clipped radio burst carried up, the quick chirp before someone speaks. I couldn't tell if it was a neighbor or police outside, but it changed his mind. He dragged himself back inside, knocked my lamp to the floor, and stomped across my room. I stayed face down and told the dispatcher he was moving. I heard the hallway, then the stairs again, faster now, then the slam of the door to the kitchen, then heavy steps across the garage. His head disappeared back inside. I heard sirens approaching. Downstairs a door slammed. The intruder was running. Police were already on the street. Later I learned they caught him 2 blocks away trying to climb over someone's fence. He was on parole, a few weeks out, moving house to house looking for cash or small electronics. They found my dad's drill in his backpack and some jewelry that wasn't ours. He'd pried the side door of the garage and worked through fast. An officer walked me through the house and took my statement while others searched. I'm not allowed to stay home alone now, and we installed an alarm with sensors on every door. I'm glad it ended the way it did, but the memory still scares me. The image of his face inches from mine on that roof doesn't fade. I think about the luck in it, the window to the porch roof, the sirens turning down our block when they did, the fact he never looked up. I keep running the what if in my head. What if the window stuck? What if he dropped down? What if I'd made a sound? I got lucky, and I know it. In early 2020, right when the pandemic started and everyone was looking for ways to make money from home, I joined this online crypto investment community through a friend's invitation. It was a private Telegram channel with about 2,000 members, invite only, run by this woman named Victoria Chen, who was in her early 40s and had this perfect reputation in finance circles. She'd spoken at conferences and published analysis reports and had all these credentials. She promised monthly returns of 30 to 50% through complex arbitrage strategies and exclusive access to pre-sale tokens, which sounded too good to be true, but I watched for a month before putting any money in. I told myself I was just observing. I screenshotted her charts, her bot outputs, the way payouts lined up with market headlines. My first investment was $3,000 in April 2020, and by June I'd made back 4,200 legitimate deposits into my bank account, so I put in more. I remember telling my sister, "It's weird, but it works," and she said not to be dumb. I wasn't trying to be dumb. I was trying to replace freelance income that had vanished overnight. The community had strict rules. There were inner circles for higher investors, and I got access to the Platinum members chat after I invested 15,000 total. Getting admitted felt like I'd made it, which is embarrassing to admit now, but at the time it felt like competence. The Platinum chat was where they discussed riskier strategies, and the atmosphere was toxic as hell. Anyone who questioned Victoria's methods or asked for proof of licensing got immediately kicked and banned. A guy asked a basic question about whether certain yield products were even legal to market in the US, and a moderator posted his username with a clown emoji and wrote, "Enjoy poverty." Victoria had this team of moderators who aggressively defended her and publicly shamed people who expressed doubts, calling them losers or paper hands, or too scared to make real money. They also accused critics of being spies from competing groups. I kept quiet because my balance kept growing, at least on paper in the Telegram bot that tracked our accounts, and it seemed stupid to risk losing access to profits like that. When someone asked for a small withdrawal to test the pipe, mods replied, "Stop wasting staff time." And I told myself that made sense. Scale matters, right? In October 2020, someone with the username TruthSeeker started posting in the main channel asking uncomfortable questions about Victoria's business licenses and whether her strategies were legal in the US. He got banned within an hour, but he created an alternative Telegram channel and started posting evidence, screenshots of conversations, documents showing that several of her successful investments were completely fabricated and that early investors were being paid with money from new investors. Classic pyramid scheme. People in our group called him a hater. A few of us looked, most didn't. I clicked once, skimmed, and closed it. I didn't want to believe it because that meant I'd lose everything, so I ignored his channel and stayed in Victoria's group. By January 2021, the payouts started getting delayed. Victoria said there were technical issues with the exchange. Then she said the bank was holding funds for verification. Excuses kept changing every week. The first time, I shrugged it off. Banks do flag weird activity. The third time, I opened my spreadsheet and highlighted every pending payout in red. A few of the biggest investors demanded to withdraw their full balances, and Victoria locked all withdrawals entirely, said the platform was undergoing maintenance and would reopen in a week. Mods spammed maintenance gifs and told us to relax. That's when I knew it was over. I'd been scammed, and I left the channel immediately. I wrote a message to my friend who invited me. No blame, just, I think we're cooked. TruthSeeker, whose real name was Robert, turned out to be a former financial auditor who'd lost his mother's retirement savings in Victoria's scheme, about $80,000. He posted a long voice note explaining how the arbitrage descriptions didn't match actual exchange behavior. He talked fast, like someone who'd rehearsed this 100 times, and shared a checklist for documenting losses. He created a group for victims, collected evidence from everyone who was willing to share, and filed a complaint with the SEC. When he called me, he didn't push. He asked for what I actually had: transaction histories, bank statements showing deposits, the bot messages, the moments Victoria changed explanations. I agreed to be a witness because I had all my transaction records and message screenshots saved. I made a folder, numbered files, and wrote short summaries because he said investigators appreciate timelines. He told me not to contact Victoria or her mods, not to confront anyone, just preserve evidence and keep quiet. That fit my instincts. I blocked the channels and turned off Telegram notifications entirely. In the victim group chat, people were angry, but practical. A nurse had used hazard pay to invest. A guy who ran a small auto shop had borrowed against his truck. No one wanted drama. They wanted an outcome. Robert's pinned post basically said, "No threats, no harassment. We do this clean." So we did. He set up a shared spreadsheet, matched wallet addresses to deposits, and cross-referenced names to confirm counts. It was weirdly comforting seeing lines add up. My total loss ended up at just under 22,000 when you stripped out the early payouts, and seeing that number in a cell hurt less than seeing it in my bank app, if that makes sense. 6 months later, Victoria Chen was arrested. She'd stolen $8 million total from about 300 investors, paying out to some while recruiting new ones to cover the payouts, and it all collapsed when she ran out of new money. After her arrest, her supporters went insane on social media, attacking everyone who testified or spoke publicly about the case, calling us traitors and jealous losers who couldn't handle the game. I got threatening DMs on every platform I had, people saying I should watch my back, and I started getting alerts about login attempts from different countries. I deleted Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, everything except LinkedIn, which I needed for work, and I changed my phone number because someone got it and started sending texts at 3 in the morning. The two friends I'd brought into the scheme, Sarah and Monica, lost $8,000 and $12,000, and they both cut contact with me completely. I tried calling, I tried emailing, nothing. I don't blame them. I was the one who said it was legitimate and safe, and I said it more than once. Robert still runs a blog where he warns people about financial scams and pyramid schemes, explains the red flags to watch for, and I read it sometimes when I need to remind myself that I'm not alone. One night I got a text that said, "Snitch," from a new number. I took screenshots, forwarded them to the agent who'd emailed me after the arrest, and he replied to keep records and not engage. So I stopped answering. I put 2-factor on everything and made a folder with my reports by the front door in case I ever needed to show police fast. Someone tried to reset my bank password twice in a week, and I drove to the branch instead of calling because I didn't trust the phone. A mod from Victoria's group posted my old profile photo in a thread, and people piled on with insults. I reported it, saved the URL, moved on. Day to day, I kept my head down. No more public posts, no new photos, no tagging my location. I blocked unknown calls. When a coworker asked why I was hard to reach, I said I was dealing with identity theft and left it at that. Robert messaged me that he was compiling long-form guides for victims and asked if he could quote my timeline without my name. I agreed. I met him once in a busy coffee shop at lunch. He looked worn out but steady. He said, "They scream to scare you." It means they're worried I believed him because the harassment always spiked after any court date or news story. I kept my job, I paid bills, and I waited for the next step. Victoria's trial was in late 2022. I took a day off and sat in the back. Her attorney tried to reframe it as market risk and sour grapes, but the evidence was stupid clear. Fake account dashboards, recycled wallet addresses, staged payouts to keep early investors happy. Robert testified about the paper trail. I answered questions about my deposits and the promises I heard. I wasn't brave. I was just tired of being afraid of people hiding behind fake names. When the jury came back and the judge read the counts, I watched Victoria stare straight ahead like she was bored. She got 9 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution, but there was almost nothing left. She'd burned it on cars and a house that got seized. I got back about 2,000 of the 15,000 I lost. It's more than nothing, not much. The prosecutor told us restitution is a long road and may never fully pay out. I walked outside and texted my husband that it was over for now. He wrote back, "Proud of you." On the ride home, I drafted messages to Sarah and Monica and then deleted them. I had already apologized twice. They didn't respond then, and I wouldn't force them now. I lost 2 friendships, and I accept that. Once in a while, I see posts on Reddit and Twitter about crypto opportunities that sound exactly like Victoria's pitch. They promise monthly returns with vague explanations and big talk. I stare at the comment box and want to warn them. Then I remember I wouldn't have listened either. People learn when the money is gone, not before. So I close the tab and go back to work. If something sounds too good to be true in investing, it's a lie, period. No exceptions, not for you, not for me. I work a regular job now, save money in a boring index fund, and I don't trust anyone who promises me quick wealth because I already know where that road leads. So this happened in fall of 2020 when I was a sophomore. My name's Lauren, 19, photography club, living in a half-empty dorm because most people stayed home that semester. Nathan, who has a talent for finding dumb but interesting ideas, told us about Weston Hall's old wing that got closed for renovations 2 years back. He said there were still lecture halls with antique desks and these stained glass windows nobody sees anymore. Perfect for the kind of moody shots Becca loves. We all needed locations for our final project, and the campus was picked clean. Nathan swore an upperclassman said you could get to the old wing through service corridors that connected the buildings for the heating system. Not exactly forbidden, just don't be there unless you're staff. He pitched it like a simple detour. In and out. 10 minutes, he kept saying, checking the map screenshot his friend sent. It looked legit in that grainy, late-night way. I asked the only question that mattered. If we run into maintenance, who talks? He said he would. Becca shrugged and said she'd rather risk a warning than shoot more photos of empty quads. Our fourth was Sam, quiet guy, good with tripods, who mostly nodded and said to wear dark clothes. We picked Sunday evening because campus empties out on weekends and there were fewer RAs walking around. Around 7, I texted my roommate I'd be at the library and left it at that. The weather had already gone cold, and the air had that burnt dust smell the radiators make when they kick on for the first time. It felt normal in the way dumb choices always do before they aren't. The entrance to the service corridor was in our dorm basement behind a door marked maintenance room, usually locked. That night it was cracked an inch, like someone forgot it mid-shift. I remember all of us standing there, nobody touching it, waiting for someone else to say it was a bad idea. Nathan pushed it with 2 fingers and looked pleased when it didn't beep. Inside was a narrow corridor, concrete walls, old pipes shoulder height, the kind of dull humming that sits in your chest. The air was warm and stale and tasted like machine oil. We kept our voices down, even though no one was around. Sam had a little headlamp and walked behind Nathan so he could see the map and the floor at the same time. I kept thinking about how if anyone yelled at us, we'd just apologize and leave. That was the plan. No hero moves. We turned left, then right, then passed under a grate where I could hear music thumping from some upper floor. The map had blocks labeled with building codes, and Nathan traced them with his finger like he'd memorized the path. 2 more turns, he said. It had been maybe 15 minutes, which felt longer without clocks. At the end of the last stretch, metal stairs went up to a door with a little wire glass window and a label. Weston Hall, ground floor. There was a keypad right where you'd expect it. Nathan wiped his hand on his hoodie and tried one of the standard campus codes. No luck. He tried another, then laughed under his breath and said, "Third time's the charm," like he could jinx it into working. On the third attempt, the lock clicked. We looked at each other and nobody cheered, which tells you where our nerves were. We went up in single file and Nathan pushed through into a hallway that smelled like mold and stale air. It was dead quiet. Our shoes made that hollow sound you only hear in empty buildings. The windows along one side were covered with plywood, and whatever light got through was thin and useless, so we pulled out our phones and turned on flashlights. "Okay, this rules," Becca said, already sliding her camera out of her tote. The hallway was lined with old placards and glass display cases yanked from the walls and stacked in corners. It didn't look touched in years. I was about to tell her to wait when we all went still at the same time. Somewhere behind us, metal creaked. The door. Then slow footsteps on the stairs we had just used, not trying to be quiet. Nathan killed his light. I followed. The dark felt heavier than it should have. "Hey, who's there? Campus security!" A man's voice, loud, bouncing down the hall. For about half a second we were statues. Then every bit of instinct said move. All four of us bolted the other way. It wasn't like in movies with people tripping and screaming. It was fast, controlled, the kind of run you do when you know getting caught means paperwork and calls to parents and maybe worse. We split into a tight line and followed Nathan because he was closest to the doors. "Left," he hissed, and we cut down a side stretch that felt identical to the first. The flashlight cones jittered over peeling paint and taped up notices. Every door looked the same until one didn't. Old brass handle, slight give when he tried it. He pushed. It swung inward with a cough of dust, and we tumbled into a lecture hall, everything under gray tarps. At the front of the room there was a window without plywood, the kind you crank open, and that tiny bit of outside light made everything feel less tight. We heard the door we'd come through groan again, and the solid thump of boots on concrete. Then the slow sweep of a flashlight outside the lecture hall door. Becca whispered, "No time," and reached the window before anyone argued. She got the latch on the second try and shoved it wide. Cool air slid in. Nathan checked the hallway, mouthed, "He's close," and we didn't waste another second. Becca went first because it was her idea. She swung her legs out, tested the drop, and slid off. I heard her shoes hit and a soft, "I'm good." Nathan passed out her bag and then climbed through. Sam moved to help me, but I waved him on. I didn't want to be the one who made us slow. He slipped out clean. I got the frame under my palms and looked down. First floor, sure, but the ground outside sat lower by a couple feet, just enough to mess with balance. I pushed off, landed harder than I thought I would, and my ankle rolled sideways. That hot, stupid pain shot up my leg. I bit it down and made the smallest sound I could manage. Nathan grabbed my arm. "Can you run?" he asked. I nodded because the only alternative was getting caught by a man with a radio who knew our names by sunrise. We moved fast across the lawn, phones shoved away. The grass was uneven and my ankle kept shouting at me with each step, but adrenaline did most of the work. We cut behind Weston to the neighboring building and dropped into a crouch behind a line of bushes, the leaves scraping our jackets. From there we could see the Weston door. It swung open, and the guard stepped out, flashlight up, slow scan across the lawn like he had all night. He didn't rush. He looked annoyed more than anything. I held my breath every time the beam got close to our spot. Becca was next to me, hands clasped on her camera like she was praying. Sam kept one hand on my shoulder. steadying me whenever I shifted. Nathan peered through the branches and whispered, "When he goes left, we go right." The guard did a lazy loop, checked the window we'd used, and shone his light along the wall. He said something into his radio, but we couldn't hear the reply. When he finally started walking the far side, we slid low along the bushes, then cut between two trees and hugged the shadow side of the next building. No main paths. That was the rule now. My ankle protested on every turn, but I kept moving. We crossed a loading zone, ducked behind a dumpster, and then took the long way past the faculty parking lot, keeping the cars between us and open space. Every noise felt too loud, even though we were careful. Zippers, a bag bumping, the clack of a shoe on pavement. We paused twice to listen for footsteps and heard nothing. After what felt like 10 minutes but was probably 5, the dorm's back entrance came into view. Nathan held the door while we slipped in, one after another, trying to look like we belonged, which is harder than it sounds when your heart is in your throat. The elevator would be a trap, so we took the stairs 2 flights, quick and quiet. Becca's room was on the corner. She fumbled the key card twice because her hands were shaking. Then we were inside, door shut, bolt thrown. We stood there breathing hard, nobody talking. Then it hit all at once, and we started laughing. Short, messy laughs that sound a little like crying, because we'd just done something unnecessary and almost got nailed for it. We hadn't taken a single photo. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd dragged cameras and lenses for nothing and escaped through a window like a cheap thriller. The next morning, I woke up to that hollow post-adrenaline feeling and checked my campus email before even brushing my teeth, expecting a message from security telling us to report somewhere and explain ourselves. Nothing. Midday, still nothing. I kept checking between online classes like I could will it into existence and be done with the waiting. It never came. We figured the guard couldn't see us clearly in the dark and didn't bother writing it up. Sarah, my roommate, started sending me memes about professional window exits and parkour majors, and I sent them to the group chat. We made a quiet agreement. Next time we'd find legal spots for shoots and ask for permission like normal people. My ankle took a week to stop hurting, and my heart took longer. I keep replaying that moment we heard campus security and wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed and explained. Probably a write-up, maybe losing lab access for a semester, a few emails to our parents. Boring consequences. But in that hallway, with that voice and that flashlight, panic did what panic does and our brains just said run. My Uncle Thomas told me this story about 5 years ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. This happened in Chicago about 15 years back when he worked as a financial analyst downtown. He used those underground pedestrian tunnels every day, the ones that connect the office buildings to the train lines. In winter, it's the only sane way to commute. He said he could walk that path half asleep, headphones in, coffee cooling in his hand, and never bump a shoulder. After 7 at night, the crowds thinned, and by 9 it was mostly echo and the odd late straggler. That October, quarterlies had him chained to the desk. He was running variance checks until the cleaning crew started giving him that go-home look. He logged out, packed up, and took the elevator down. He told me the tunnel lights always seemed dimmer in the far stretches, patches where bulbs took forever to get replaced. He didn't care. He'd done the route hundreds of times. Left past the newsstand shutter, straight past the sandwich place gate, right at the blue tile wall. He said he wasn't nervous. Tired, sure. He wanted the train, a seat, and no small talk. He checked his watch, just after 9, and thought about whether there'd still be a seat on his line. He remembered the cold air pooled near the staircase and a little grit under his shoes from salt tracked in earlier. Normal. All of it was normal. In the middle of a long, straight section, he clocked a guy coming toward him maybe 100 feet out. Nothing special. People pass each other down there all the time. Uncle said he kept walking and didn't think about it until a few steps later when something tugged at him. Just the way the guy moved, maybe. He was in dark work coveralls and heavy boots, carrying a canvas bag slung high on one shoulder. Not a messenger bag, more like a tool bag. The guy walked slow and heavy, head down. Uncle's brain slotted him as night crew or construction. He remembered thinking, "Fine, you do your thing. I'll do mine." They got within about 6 feet, and the guy just stopped. No sidestep, no "excuse me." Stopped. Then the head turned, and he looked right at my uncle. Uncle said the face threw him, pale in that bad fluorescent way, but the eyes were dark and still. No flicker like you get when someone's thinking or deciding where to go. And those coveralls had stains down the leg and across the forearms. At first he thought mud. Then he ran through other options. Oil, paint, whatever. Because you do that fast math when you want something to make sense. The canvas bag didn't swing like an empty bag. It had weight and an awkward shape. The guy didn't say a word. Just stared. My uncle did the polite city nod and shifted his shoulder to go around. He said the guy didn't move or speak, just tracked him with his eyes while holding the bag like it was nothing at all. Uncle passed, quick, because he wasn't trying to start anything, and because the air felt wrong. His words, not mine. Like he was being measured. After he'd gone maybe 30 feet, he risked a look back. The guy was still standing there, turned so he could keep watching. Bag still up on his shoulder, the shape bulging and uneven. That got my uncle's heart rate up. He's not the type to spook easy. He did a whole year of night classes 3 neighborhoods away and never flinched. But the stare just clung to him. He put his phone in his coat pocket, not to call anyone, just so it wasn't in his hand, and he picked up his pace. He didn't break into a run. He said that felt like a line you don't cross unless you're sure. But he walked fast enough that his breath shortened. He hit the next turn, took it, and didn't look back again until he could see the orange glow from the station entrance. A couple of people were coming down the opposite stairs, 2 teens with backpacks and a woman in a blazer. He felt that drop of relief you get when you see other people. Witnesses, is how he put it. He went through the turnstile, up to the platform, and stood where he could see both the escalator and the track. There were a few scattered riders, a transit cop talking to a fare machine tech. He kept his eyes on the tunnel entrance anyway, just in case. No coveralls, no canvas bag. The train rolled in. He got a seat. He told himself he'd built it up in his head. Maybe the guy worked nights and the stains were hydraulic fluid or ink or God knows what. Maybe he'd stopped because he didn't want to brush shoulders in an empty corridor. He tried to picture the bag with tools in it, a mallet, wrenches, anything that made it normal. He said he almost convinced himself, but then he'd blink and see those still eyes again, and the way the guy didn't even pretend to be in a hurry. He made it home like always. The apartment was warm. My aunt was grading papers at the table. He told her, not dramatic, just laid it out while he shrugged off his coat. He said, "Weird guy in the tunnel by the station. Coveralls, big bag. Stopped right in front of me and just stared." She looked up and asked if he said anything. He said no. She asked if the guy followed him. Again, no. "Then you're fine," she said, with that tired end-of-day voice. "You watch too many crime shows." 3 months later, in January, my uncle was watching evening news. Chicago police had arrested a man tied to a series of attacks on women in the Loop. The anchor said bodies were found in abandoned sections of old tunnels, parts of the system people forgot existed. They ran B-roll of sealed doors and rusted gates, and then they put up the suspect's photo. Uncle said the room tilted. Same pale face. Same dark, flat eyes. They said he worked as a technician in the tunnel system. Access badge, keys, the whole thing. He knew every quiet stretch and which cameras didn't work. My aunt heard him swear from the living room and came over with a dish towel in her hand. He pointed at the screen and said, "That's him. That's the guy from October." She asked if he was sure. He said, "I'm sure." And his voice sounded like someone else's. The segment mentioned late evening patrols and maintenance checks. The reporter said the suspect used the job to move unnoticed, that he'd lure or chase victims into dead zones and stash them behind service doors. Uncle turned the volume up until the speaker cracked. He called the non-emergency line first, then got routed to a detective. He explained the encounter, the coveralls, the canvas bag, the silent stare. He didn't try to sell it. He just gave the facts. The detective asked for dates and times. Uncle pulled his old calendar from the desk and found the night because he'd written Q4 variants late on it. They asked him to come in the next day. At the station, a detective with a notebook asked him to walk through the path he took, which tunnel branch, where exactly the man stopped. Uncle drew it on a printed map. He kept saying he didn't want to claim anything he didn't see. He didn't see the guy hurt anyone. He didn't see inside the bag. He only saw the stare and the stains. The detective said that mattered. They were building a timeline. A day later, they showed him a photo array. He picked the technician right away. No hesitation. The detective nodded like he'd expected that. They told him, in careful phrases, that the man had been on late shifts, checking inaccessible runs. They had keycard logs. One of the assaults happened less than a week after Uncle's encounter. Another victim vanished from a stairwell near the same straight section. Uncle gave a formal statement. He signed it. He asked quietly if the bag had tools. The detective didn't answer directly, just said evidence would be presented in court. He told my aunt that night he wasn't sleeping well. She made tea he didn't drink. They called him again for grand jury. He repeated the story, under oath this time. The prosecutor asked if he'd felt threatened. He said yes, but not in a way he could quantify, just a surge of get out now. He added that if he'd been smaller, slower, or if he'd stopped to be polite, he didn't think he would have made the platform. He hated saying that out loud. It made it real. When the trial came up months later, Uncle wasn't needed, but they kept him updated. The news covered it daily. The technicians' union rep looked like he wanted to vanish. The defense tried to paint him as a loner with a bad temper. The forensics didn't care about spin. By the end, the jury didn't take long. Life without parole. The stations replayed the hallway footage and the booking photo until it was burned into his head. He never used the tunnels after 7 again. If he had to work late, he grabbed a rideshare from the front door. He changed his routes. He started sitting near exits in restaurants and kept his headphones off when he walked anywhere. He said instinct saved him that night. My aunt said his hands still shook when he told it, and sometimes he'd stop in the middle and rub his palms together like they were cold. He kept seeing that canvas bag in his sleep. In the dream, he always helped. Of course he helped, because that's what decent people do. And then he realized, too late, what he'd volunteered for. He tried ignoring the news after the sentencing, but the story kept rerunning. Anniversary segments and safety advisories. He saw the families outside the courthouse. He saw the taped-off doors where people used to cut through. He told me he didn't feel relief, just a hard, dry kind of anger. He wondered how many women saw what he saw and dismissed it because they didn't want to be rude. He wondered how many warnings the system had and how many were waved off as nothing. I think about it every time I'm tempted to take a shortcut. He tells me, "Don't borrow trouble," then adds, "But if something feels wrong, treat it like it's wrong." He says most days are boring, and boring is good. But danger doesn't announce itself with a theme song. It looks like a worker with a bag, like a man who stops 6 feet away and won't blink. He says he trusts his gut now, even when it makes no sense and someone might roll their eyes. He tells me to pick the lit street, spend the extra $10, keep moving, and listen when that animal part of your brain says, now. The call came 3 days later, and that's when I realized how close I'd been to something really bad. He asked me about the sunshade on my back window, something I'd put up that night after leaving the diner. I told him I always use it to protect medical samples from heat, which was a lie. The truth is, I'd never used it before that night. I hung up, blocked his number, and sat in my car shaking for 20 minutes. But I need to explain what happened before that call, because looking back now, the warning signs were everywhere. I grew up in a closed religious community where contact with outsiders was strictly controlled. My parents homeschooled me and my younger brother. We only left the compound for groceries, medical appointments, and my gymnastics competitions. The community was proud of my success and saw it as validation of our way of life. When I was 13, a local TV station did a short segment about me for the evening news. It mattered because we were taught to keep our names close, to avoid photos, to stay separate. The segment used my first and last name and showed our faces after a meet. My mother cried about it later, not because of modesty, but because she said the world remembers. That stuck with me. People notice small things and keep them. I didn't believe any of it until I left. I left at 19 and learned fast that you can be invisible until you're not. And once someone picks you out of the crowd, they can keep pulling thread. I left the community when I was 19 and got a job as a medical courier, driving specimens between clinics and labs across 3 states. The work paid decent and let me see places I'd never been. It was simple. Pickup, chain of custody paperwork, delivery, repeat. I liked the routine and the quiet. I kept a cooler in the back seat and a tablet for manifests. I used to joke that I was a glorified pizza driver with fewer complaints about cold crust. I stayed careful about routes and daylight stops, but sometimes you get tired. Sometimes you figure a coffee is worth 10 minutes. That evening I stopped at a diner about 4 hours from home. The place was nearly empty, just me, a waitress, and a man in his 40s sitting by the window. I parked where I could see my car from the booth and sat near an outlet to charge my phone. I ordered coffee and a sandwich. He looked over once, then again. Normal enough. I've seen truckers do the same. After a minute he nodded, friendly, like we were both just killing time on the road. He started a conversation, asking if I was a courier because he'd seen my car with medical stickers in the parking lot. I said yeah, short routes mostly, nothing dramatic. We talked for maybe 15 minutes about work, road conditions, weather, normal small talk. He said he traveled for insurance assessments, lots of driving, lots of rest stops. Then he said something that caught me off guard. He asked if I'd noticed him touching my tablet 3 times while I was looking at my phone. I blinked at him, reached for the tablet without picking it up and said, "No. Why would you do that?" He smiled like it was a joke on me. "Testing your awareness," he said. "It's important to stay alert on the roads." I told him it wasn't funny. He said, "You're carrying medical stuff. People target that sometimes." "I was doing you a favor," I said. "By touching my property?" He lifted his hands like, okay. The waitress refilled my coffee and shot me a look that read, "You good?" I nodded because nothing had happened except a weird comment, and my pride stung that I hadn't noticed. He kept talking, softer now, like we were in on something together. He said if I was his sister, he'd tell me to get pepper spray and keep my hair up so nobody could grab it. Practical advice, sure. It disarmed me a little. The waitress went to the kitchen, and we were alone in the dining area. His questions got more personal. He asked where I was from, if I had family, how often I went home. I answered without thinking, not seeing any danger in casual conversation. "Middle of nowhere," I said. "I'm 23. It's just me and my brother now." He nodded like he was mapping me. He asked how late I drove, if I ever took the same route 2 nights in a row. I said I changed it up. He told me that was smart and smiled in a way I didn't like I'd passed a test I hadn't signed up for. Then he asked for my parents' full names, my mother's maiden name, the address of my childhood clinic. He explained he worked in insurance and was used to collecting that information. Said it helps him remember people, builds rapport. "You'd be surprised what people forget about themselves," he said. It seemed reasonable at the time in that dumb way where something sounds official and you want to be polite. I gave him my parents' first names and said I didn't share last names. He laughed and said, "Fair." Then he asked the clinic. I started to answer and stopped. He leaned in and rolled up his sleeve and showed me the inside of his forearm. He said I had the same birthmark, a triangular shape just above the elbow. I do have that birthmark. I felt it before I looked, my skin going hot. I instinctively covered my arm with my other hand. I asked how he knew about it. He shrugged and said he just guessed. The air in the diner felt heavy suddenly. He continued talking, saying I must have done gymnastics as a child because of my posture. When I confirmed it, he repeated almost word for word the phrase I'd said in that TV segment 10 years ago. The one about my body being an instrument given from above, that I was just learning to use. My voice shook when I asked how he remembered that. He said he remembers a lot of things. Then he offered to give me a ride to the next town, saying my car looked unreliable. I declined, making up something about urgent deliveries. He insisted, said we could stop at his house first. It was nearby. I could rest there. I refused again. His expression stayed the same, but his eyes didn't. I stood up fast, said I had to go, paid at the counter, and walked out without looking back. In my car, I immediately locked the doors and pulled down the sunshade on the rear window so he couldn't see inside if he came to look. I put my phone on record and set it face down in the cup holder. I slid my tablet into the glove box because I kept replaying him saying he touched it. I adjusted the mirrors so I could see the diner door in the far end of the lot. I told myself I'd leave steady, no sudden moves, and brake pattern after a mile. He didn't come out for a minute. When he did, he scanned the lot like he'd lost something, glanced once in my direction, and kept moving. He got in his car and drove to the far side, out of my sightline. I started the engine and rolled out. I tucked in behind a truck, took the next exit, and cut to a state route I almost never use. I messaged my supervisor that traffic was weird and my ETA might shift. At the next clinic, I did the drop, signed, left. I picked a motel with cameras and an office open late, paid for a room near the lobby, parked under a light. I kept the sunshade up. I slept in short bursts with shoes on and keys in my hand. At dawn, I walked the lot once. No silver sedan, no him. In the morning, his car was gone from the parking lot. I continued my route but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every silver sedan made me check my mirrors. I kept extra distance and always an exit. Nothing happened. 3 days passed without incident. Then came the phone call. His voice was casual, friendly even, asking about the sunshade like it was nothing. After I lied about always using it, he talked about the weather for another minute before saying goodbye. I blocked the number. I sat very still and listened for anything outside my apartment, then made myself breathe normal and wrote everything down. I changed my number the next day and reported the incident to my supervisor. They advised me to avoid stopping at isolated locations. I asked if anyone else had reported a man like that. They said no, but to file a note under my route and vehicle. I swapped the medical stickers for removable magnets. I started planning my routes to only stop at busy truck stops or well-lit gas stations during daylight hours. I moved my tablet to a locking mount and added a basic dash cam. I practiced loading everything in one trip. Door locked between steps, keys clipped. I told my brother not to post anything about me for a while. I told myself that being careful isn't being scared, it's being alive. What still bothers me most is how he knew about that TV segment. It aired in a small town over 1,000 miles from that diner. I've searched online and can't find any trace of it. The local station's archives don't go back that far. I asked my mother if she kept a copy. She said no and told me to leave it alone. It wasn't famous. It barely aired once. So either he recorded it back then, or someone handed it to him, or he was there in person and kept me in his head long enough to spot me a decade later in a half-empty diner, and I never found out which. In March 2010, I flew to Portland for a 3-day project management seminar my company sent me to. They'd booked a room at a small business hotel, one of those late 80s buildings that's clean but basic. I didn't care. I was there to collect slides, shake hands, and get back home. The first night I was wiped from the flight and the presentations. I ate something forgettable from the lobby, skimmed my notes, set a 6 a.m. alarm, and crashed around 11. The air unit hummed, traffic noise was faint, and I remember thinking I'd sleep like a rock. Around 3 in the morning, my phone on the nightstand vibrated. Not ringing, just that buzz from a notification. It jolted me out of sleep harder than it should have. I fumbled for it, eyes gritty, and saw a missed call from an unknown number with no voicemail. I stared a second, half expecting a follow-up, then tossed the phone back and rolled to settle again. I had just exhaled when the right edge of the mattress sank down, like someone sat there. Not a vague dip. The bed dropped on the edge, the way it does when a person actually puts their weight on it. My skin went cold. The depression felt like a real body, heavy, maybe 150 pounds, right at the edge about 2 feet from my legs. I froze. I didn't dare flinch. I listened for breathing, fabric, anything. Nothing. No movement. No shifting springs. Just a static pressure, and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The angle of the mattress pulled me toward that side just a little. It stayed that way. Steady, solid weight pinning the edge. I tried to count to 10 and lost track. It felt like at least a minute, maybe more. I remember thinking if it was a prank I'd hear a shoe scuff or a zipper. There was nothing. Slowly I turned my head to look. The bathroom light was on, door pulled almost shut, so a thin slash of light cut across the carpet. I could see the bed's edge clearly. No one was sitting there. The space was empty. But the mattress was still compressed. I could see the indent, a neat scoop in the foam, blanket pulled slightly downward like something was still weighing it. I stared until my eyes watered. The dip did not change. I thought about saying something out loud. Hello? But I clamped my jaw and stayed quiet. I don't know why. It felt like sound would make it worse. I reached out fast and slammed the lamp switch. Light flooded the room and I sat up quick, scanning the doorway, the corners, the chair by the window, the ceiling. The edge of the bed was empty. The mattress was level now. No depression, no drag in the blanket. Just flat. My pulse didn't slow. I swung my legs over the side, stood, and made myself do a methodical check. Bathroom first. Shower curtain pulled back. Nothing. Trash can. Nothing. I checked the door next. The deadbolt was thrown, the handle lock engaged, and the swing bar was across. I jiggled it. Solid. Window was shut and latched. Heavy glass, street glare coming through the curtain gap. No way someone came or went that way. I dropped to a knee and checked under the bed. Just dust and a spare blanket folded in a bag. I opened the closet, slid hangers apart. Iron, board, safe, empty floor. I even pressed my palm against the drywall where the headboard sat, like I'd somehow feel a panel. Nothing. I went back to the bathroom and checked behind the door again. Then behind the shower wall, just because my brain needed a task. No noise in the hallway. No footsteps overhead. I stood there longer than I needed to, hearing the air unit kick on and off, realizing how dumb I looked holding my breath like a kid playing hide and seek. I sat back on the bed and ran my hand over the spot where I'd felt the weight. Normal give. No broken spring. No crater. I pushed hard with my palm, trying to recreate it, and the mattress just rebounded like any mid-range hotel bed. I stayed there, hand resting on the sheet, and went through every explanation I could stomach. Maybe a muscle spasm in my back, a phantom sensation that convinced me the bed moved. Maybe the platform flexed and then reset. Maybe I'd been in that weird half-sleep where your brain invents something and your body buys it. I thought about the phone buzz and the timing, about the exact way the pull felt, how it stayed the same weight and distance like a person who sat and didn't shift. I wasn't trying to scare myself. I wanted the boring answer. I would have gladly blamed a cheap spring. But nothing lined up. Not with how specific it was, how I could see the indent and the blanket tugged down. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had a seminar at 8 and needed rest, but my body didn't listen. I sat there in the too bright light, counting my own breaths like someone learning to swim again, trying to accept that I might never pin it on anything because the sensation had been so clear and specific. I laid back down, but kept the light on, staring at that edge like it might sink again. I didn't close my eyes. Every hallway creak made me check the door. Nothing else happened the rest of the night. Around 6, the sky brightened behind the curtains, and I was still on my back, stiff, annoyed at myself for being jumpy but not willing to test it in the dark. I showered, dressed, and kept side-eyeing the bed. In the lobby, I asked the desk clerk if there'd been any issues with room 412, problems with the bed or noise complaints. I tried to sound casual. She checked her screen and said the last maintenance note for that room was 2 years ago. No recent complaints. She waited for more. I just said I thought I heard something. I didn't mention the dip. Then I asked to switch rooms. I said elevator noise was bothering me even though I wasn't near the elevators. She printed a new key without arguing. Different floor, same layout, different bed. I dropped my bag, pushed on the mattress, solid. That day at the seminar I was sharper than I deserved, running on adrenaline and stubbornness. That night in the new room, nothing. No late calls, no dips, no reason to sit up. The night after, same. I flew home and tried not to think about it. Work picked back up. Later, I looked up hypnagogic hallucinations, the sensory stuff when you're falling asleep or waking up. Your brain is partly in dream state and can create touches, pressure, a sense of someone nearby. The articles were clear. Common, harmless, more likely with travel and stress. They even listed weight on the body as a thing people feel. That explanation made sense and gave me something rational to hold on to. I wanted a box to put it in so it would stop bugging me. But I'd been fully awake after checking my phone. I wasn't drifting in or out. I stared at the missed call, saw the time and the number, felt the edge of the phone in my hand. I can accept panic fooling my body. I've had that happen at work. This didn't start like panic. There was no rush until after the weight appeared. It was specific and steady, like a person who sat down and didn't move. My memory isn't perfect, but that part is pinned in place. The visual part is what bothers me most. I saw the mattress compress before I hit the lamp. I saw the blanket pull down on that side, and then when the light came on, it was flat again. If it was my brain inventing it, why did the light change it? I've tried to recreate the look in other hotels with the same pushing on the edge trick. It never matches what I saw. That gap between probably your brain and but you watched it is what keeps it alive. I haven't stayed at that hotel again. When coworkers suggest Portland, I steer us to a different part of the city, away from that business district. I don't say why. If someone presses, I talk about parking or a better coffee place. That's true enough. It isn't about being dramatic. It's about not inviting that exact situation back into my life if I can avoid it. I don't consider myself superstitious, but the memory of that weight on my bed at 3 in the morning still makes my skin crawl, and changing hotels is a small price to keep it from repeating for me anyway, now. When I was 11 years old, something happened at a children's art exhibition that I still think about sometimes. It was a big show at the local cultural center where kids from different schools displayed their drawings and crafts. The exhibition ran all Saturday, from 9 in the morning to 6 in the evening. I went with my mom early to help hang my work on the panel. I had 3 watercolors and a small clay sculpture. There were kids from 6 to 14 from maybe 6 or 7 schools, which meant the building was packed. My mom had to leave for work around 11, so I stayed with my best friend Emma. Her mom was supposed to pick up both of us at 4. Before my mom left, she did the mom checklist. My name tag pinned straight, the little paper schedule folded into my pocket, emergency numbers in Emma's phone. Well, in her head, really, because we didn't have phones yet, and a reminder to stay in the busier areas. There were volunteers in bright vests and a few security guys with radios, and everyone who worked there wore a plastic badge on a lanyard. She made me point them out so I knew who to ask for help if anything went wrong. I said I got it. Emma rolled her eyes and said we weren't babies. The cultural center was a big 3-story building with a high atrium, marble stairs, and long corridors. We drifted from room to room, reading the little labels, trying to guess who would win prizes. We were taking it seriously in a kid way, pointing at brushstrokes like we knew anything. I remember Emma deciding that blue ribbons always went to anything with a bird in it, which made me feel good because one of mine had a bird. By about 1, we got hungry and decided to go down to the cafeteria on the first floor to buy something to eat. On the wide marble staircase, I noticed a man on the second floor. He stood by the balustrade, looking down into the atrium where people were moving around. He had on a black or maybe dark navy jacket and jeans, and I didn't really see his face. For a second it felt odd that he was just standing there doing nothing, but I let it go. We bought sandwiches and found a table near a big window. It was crowded. Parents, kids, teachers. We talked about the pieces we liked the most, and Emma kept laughing about a sculpture that, according to her, looked like a crushed cat. A teacher shushed us once, which only made Emma laugh harder later. After lunch, we threw away the wrappers, wiped our hands on napkins, and decided to go back up to the 3rd floor where most of the paintings were. I wanted to check if someone had put a little star sticker under my bird watercolor. Emma wanted to count how many birds there actually were, because she was sure it was at least 20. To get to the 3rd floor, there were 2 options: the main staircase in the atrium, where it was busy, or a service stair through a long corridor with offices. We chose the second route because we also wanted to look at an installation at the end of that corridor. The corridor was almost empty. Most visitors were either in the exhibit halls or the cafeteria. Our footsteps echoed off the walls. I remember pointing out a door with a taped sign that said, "Rehearsal Room," and asking Emma if she thought someone was practicing violin behind it. She said, "If they are, I hope they win a prize for loudest squeak." And we kept going. About halfway down, I heard a door open behind us. We both turned. A man in that same dark jacket stepped out of a door marked "Staff Only." He looked straight at us and then started walking our way at a pretty fast pace. "Girls, hold on a second," he called, loud enough to carry. We stopped. For a beat, I thought maybe he worked for the cultural center and was going to tell us something. He came closer and asked if we were lost. Emma said no, we were just heading back to the exhibit. He nodded and smiled, but the smile didn't look real. Then he said he could show us a special room with pieces that weren't on display in the main halls because there wasn't enough space. He said the room was in the basement and only open by special invitation. That sounded off. I hadn't heard anything about a basement room. I looked at Emma, and she looked uncertain too. He kept talking, saying there were really interesting things down there, that we should definitely see them while we had the chance. Something in me said this was wrong. I took Emma's hand and told him we had to go. Our parents were waiting upstairs. His face changed. He stopped smiling and said, "But your parents wanted you to see that room." They told me we hadn't said anything to him about our parents, and he didn't have a badge. I noticed that then. The people who worked there wore badges. He was just a guy in a dark jacket. Emma asked, "Who told you that?" He said a name we didn't know, and then he added, "Come on, it'll take 2 minutes. I'll walk you down and bring you back." He moved a step to the side, like he wanted to stand between us and the way we were going. I said we needed to find Miss Anderson first. He said there wasn't time, that the room might close soon. I didn't raise my voice, but I said, "We're not allowed to go anywhere without a teacher." Emma squeezed my hand, hard. He looked past us, as if checking whether someone else was coming. "All right," he said, still too calm. "At least tell me your name so I can tell them you missed the chance." That felt like another trap. I said we had to go, right now. He kept his eyes on us and said softer, "Don't be difficult." My stomach dropped. Emma took a small step back, pulling me with her. He noticed and shifted again, like he still wanted to keep us near that staff door. We didn't argue. We turned and walked fast. He said something like, "Don't run." But he raised his voice on the word. We started running. We ran the long corridor back toward the main staircase. I heard him shout after us, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't look back, and Emma didn't either. We hit the open area by the atrium, where there were people again, and we kept moving until we were in the main exhibition hall with the crowd and the tables and the volunteers. I spotted Miss Anderson by the prize ribbons and went straight to her. I told her a man without a badge tried to get us to go to the basement, and he said our parents told him to show us a special room. Emma said he came out of a door marked "Staff Only." Miss Anderson's face went flat. She told us to stay right there. She called over a security guard, a tall guy with a radio, and sent him with another volunteer down the corridor. We stayed in the hall. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Emma kept saying, "He lied about the parents," like she needed to hear it out loud to believe it. About 10 minutes later, they came back. Ms. Anderson said there wasn't anyone in the corridor. The guard said he checked the staff rooms. The doors were locked and only staff had keys. He asked us to describe the man in as much detail as we could. We did our best. Dark jacket, jeans, maybe late 30s, dark hair, no badge, a flat way of smiling. He nodded and spoke into his radio. Ms. Anderson moved our chairs closer to her table and told us not to go anywhere without her. We didn't leave an adult's side for the rest of the day. Around 3, I saw him again. He was on the first floor by the main entrance, facing the staircase and scanning faces like he was looking for someone. I touched Miss Anderson's sleeve and pointed. She said, "Stay here," and rushed to get the guard. But by the time he came, the man slipped out the front doors and was gone. The guard went after him for a few steps, and then shook his head and came back inside, talking into the radio again. Emma's mom arrived at 4, and we left right away. In the car, Emma was quiet, which wasn't normal for her. I realized my hands were shaking because I couldn't open my seatbelt clip without using both thumbs. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She called the cultural center. They said they would increase security and that they took it seriously. I still think about the basement and the staff door and what could have been waiting behind it, and I catch myself replaying the part where he said our parents told him, because that's the line that almost got us to listen. So when I was 32, I finally saved up enough to buy my first house. It was a small, older place in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing showy, but it felt like a win. I'm a nurse on nights, so my sleep schedule is chaos, and my brain is usually mush by the weekend. The listing had sat for months, which I knew wasn't great, but I was tired of sharing walls and elevators and random footsteps above me. First couple weeks were normal. Boxes, figuring out which light switch did what, learning the noises the fridge made. Then I started noticing petty stuff that aggravated me because I was trying to be organized. A kitchen drawer gaping in the morning that I remembered closing. A mug not where I left it. My laundry basket shifted half a foot. I blamed the night shifts. 12s will do weird things to your memory. And moved on. The basement was a raw concrete rectangle with exposed pipes, one useless window, and a lonely water heater. I hated the feel of it because it smelled old and because it didn't have a good reason to be used. I went down only to check the pilot or grab a box I hadn't unpacked yet. 2 weeks in, I added a couple of deadbolts and stuck a cheap door sensor on the front and back doors. Just a practical step because I sleep in the daytime. I also put a broom against the basement door on habit. Not fear, just habit. I told myself that. It was a Thursday night, technically Friday, about 2 a.m., when I got home from a rough shift full of admits and a code that still had my hands shaking a little. I microwaved leftovers and leaned on the counter watching the numbers count down. That's when I heard it from below. A scraping sound. Rhythmic, like something heavy dragging over concrete. I froze with a fork halfway up. Old houses clank, pipes hammer, floorboards pop. I know that. But this went back and forth. Drag. Pause. Drag. Same tempo, same path. I stood there long enough that the microwave beeped and then went silent, and the food just sat. It stopped for maybe a minute, then started up again like whoever, whatever, down there needed another inch. My throat felt dry. I called my brother even though I knew he'd be asleep. He answered grumpy. "You okay?" "There's a sound in the basement," I said, keeping my voice low like that would help. "Like something heavy moving." "Rats," he said, "or a pipe. Houses expand, remember? Call an exterminator in the morning. Go to bed." "I know what rats sound like," I said. "This is deliberate." "Then it's a raccoon with a plan," he said, half joking. "Don't go down there at 2 in the morning. Please." I set the phone on speaker and put it on the table. The scraping came again. I stared at the basement door until my eyes watered. My brother kept talking about traps and pest control places he knew, and I barely heard him. The scraping got louder, and the direction clicked for me. It was directly beneath the kitchen. I walked to the door and put my ear against it. Under the scrape, I picked up other sounds too. A dull thump the muted slide of something being shifted across the floor. Boxes. I didn't have furniture down there, just moving boxes and a rusted shelving unit the seller left behind. My brother kept saying to ignore it, to deal with it when the sun was up. That's when your brain makes good choices. But the sound changed. It wasn't steady anymore. It had this urgent quality, like whoever was moving hated every inch of it. My stomach tightened. "I'm just looking," I whispered. "Don't," he said. "Seriously. This is exactly how people end up on the news." I opened the basement door. The noise stopped dead, like a switch. The silence felt heavy, like it had weight. My hand hovered over the light switch. My brother's voice got tinny and far away, like I'd put the phone in another room. "Wait till daylight. Please." This is not the time. I flipped the switch. The single bulb at the bottom of the stairs came on, and it didn't do much. It lit the first half of the steps and a slice of floor. The rest of the room stayed in a vague gray. I listened hard. Nothing. No scraping. No thumps. Just the faint hum of the water heater and my own breathing. "I don't hear anything," I said, even though my mouth felt numb. "Great," he said. "Close the door. Go to bed. Call me in the morning." I leaned forward, hand on the doorframe to keep myself honest, not stepping down. The visible concrete looked normal. Dusty footprints from the movers. A flattened spider web in the corner. My old suitcase at the base of the stairs where I dumped it last week. Farther out were the boxes. I could barely make out the shelving unit by the far wall. I remembered thinking I should have labeled the boxes better. Another dumb, normal thought. Then somewhere below the stairs, in the space under them where the light didn't reach, something shifted. Not big. A quick scrape and a short bump, like a small object tapped against concrete. I felt the hair along my arms rise. I kept my feet planted on the kitchen tile. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Hear what?" my brother said. "You're freaking yourself out." A slow drag answered me, closer than before, as if whatever was moving had adjusted and was now pressed to the inside of the stairwell. I could picture the geometry, the hollow under the steps where I never looked because it was tight and pointless, the narrow triangle of darkness where a person could crouch if they really tried. I swallowed hard and didn't move. "That," I said. "What?" "I don't hear." The sound came again, louder this time and almost right beneath my knees, coming from the area under the stairs. I don't know what came over me, but I shouted into the darkness, demanding to know who was down there. My voice bounced off the concrete and came back thin. Then nothing. No scrape. No shuffle. I was about to close the door when it hit. One hard metallic bang, like someone smacked a pipe. It was deliberate. A response. My brother heard it through the phone and finally believed me. "I'm coming." "Get out," he said. I stared into the shadows and couldn't move. I heard his car start through the phone. The basement stayed quiet like something was waiting. I backed away, locked the door, and went out to the front porch. He kept me talking while he drove. I watched the street, not the side yard. Every noise made me flinch. My hands shook, so I set the phone on the step and used speaker. He said he was close. The house looked normal, which made me feel dumb, until I pictured the hollow under the stairs. Headlights turned the corner and he pulled in fast. He touched my shoulder, then reached for the knob. I begged him not to go down. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "We call it in." We called the non-emergency line and tried to explain without sounding ridiculous. I told the dispatcher there might be someone inside. She said to stay out and wait. An officer arrived, took our names, and asked basic questions. "Anyone else have keys? Number?" Anything missing? Not that I'd noticed. He went in first, saw the table against the basement door, and nodded. He opened the door, listened, and went down with his flashlight. We stayed in the kitchen. I watched the beam move around below. He called out police twice and got no answer. After a few minutes, he came back up. "No one down there," he said. "No signs of entry." My brother asked about an exterior door. I'd forgotten the cellar doors because I never used them. We walked out and he tested the hinge. The padlock was mostly rust. He pushed, and the door gave an inch. He swore and said he'd file a report. "Get a locksmith first thing," he added, and he'd request extra drive-bys. He checked the yard and the tiny basement window, then left. My brother stayed the rest of the night. We slid the kitchen table against the basement door and added a chair. Neither of us slept. At sunrise, I called a locksmith. He replaced the deadbolts and fixed the cellar doors with proper hardware and an interior hasp. He showed me how to check it and told me to keep it locked. I nodded. My brother left after lunch, but made me promise to call if I heard anything again. I said I would. We never got an answer about the sounds or why someone would be under my kitchen at 2 in the morning. I still live in the house because selling in a panic felt wrong, and I couldn't afford to start over again anyway. I don't go down there anymore unless I have help, and even then I keep it quick and talk the whole time so nothing can surprise me. Sometimes my brother sleeps on the couch when I'm coming off a rough shift. He jokes, but he parks where he can see the side door. I act like I don't notice. Most nights the place is quiet, and I remind myself I'm fine. Sometimes I keep a radio on, but sometimes late at night I hear the scraping start up again. When I was 11, our family lived in a small town in Oregon where everyone knew each other. The school had 3 hallways. The grocery knew your cereal. 2 girls in the grade below me were recognized on sight because they were twins, Emily and Chloe Thompson. The only easy way to tell them apart was the clip. Emily always wore a bright pink butterfly hair clip with glitter. Their grandmother brought it from Mexico, and Emily never parted with it. It was a Wednesday in November when Emily didn't come home. She was supposed to go to the library after school and then walk to her mom's work. The librarian said she never showed. At first, it was phone calls and adults trying to sound calm. By evening, the sheriff had a staging area at the football field. Search dogs worked the trails behind the school, and a helicopter thumped over the tree line. Volunteers lined up with flashlights while county staff handed out vests and maps. Hundreds of volunteers combed woods and vacant lots around town. The next day, the cops knocked on doors and asked everyone the same questions. Teachers and bus drivers. Which route does she usually take? Did anyone approach her? Did you notice a car idling? We had an assembly where the principal said "vigilant" 5 times and told us not to walk alone anywhere. They sent home a flyer with Emily's picture and a hotline number. They searched for months and found nothing. They checked registered offenders in the county, pulled the little security footage that existed, and sat with neighbors late into the night. Emily's parents did interviews. Her dad's voice got thinner every week, and her mom kept both hands on Chloe's shoulders like she could hold her in place. By January, Chloe stopped talking at school. The counselor called it trauma and told our class to be kind. By spring, the posters looked tired. Rain faded the ink and curled the edges. People still said the case was open, but the town adjusted like a sprained ankle. You limp and keep going. Parents got strict. We traveled in pairs. If you were late, your phone lit up. My life went on, but I kept seeing that clip in my head whenever I passed the library or the drainage path behind the school. 7 years later, I was 18, and working a summer job on my Uncle Mark's construction crew. That August, the company got a contract to demolish an old motel on the edge of town. The owner had gone bankrupt, and a developer finally bought it for teardown. Uncle Mark told us, "In and out. Watch the floors. If you see a needle, step back and call me." We started on the second floor because the roof leaked and the subfloor was soft. My job was simple: clear rooms, pull fixtures, and check plumbing lines before we shut water at the stack. Most rooms looked like people had drifted through and left pieces of their lives: empty bottles, cigarette butts, ripped blankets. One hot Tuesday, I took the key ring from the foreman and went down the row until I hit room 217. The door stuck and then gave with a hard shove. The bathroom light was dead, so I used my phone. The floor was slick with mold by the tub. I knelt by the sink to see whether the trap was PVC or old metal we'd have to cap separately. I kept one glove clean for tools and one glove dirty to move junk. That was Mark's rule. Near the floor vent, something bright had snagged on a rusty pipe next to the grate. It didn't fit the room. I leaned closer and pushed aside lint and a wad of hair with the dirty glove. A small plastic edge winked up through the dust. I pinched it and felt it resist, then give with a dry little snap as it came free. I turned it in the light from my phone. It was a pink butterfly clip with glitter. Bending down, I realized it was a pink butterfly clip with glitter, exactly like the one Emily Thompson used to wear. I froze with the clip in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. I stepped back into the hallway and called for my uncle, and when he came around the corner, I held it out and said, "I think this is Emily Thompson's. The twin. The clip." He didn't ask dumb questions. He told me to put it on a clean paper towel from the truck, not touch it again, and he called the police right there from the landing. He kept his voice steady, but he paced while he talked. I could tell he remembered the same November I did. Detectives showed up in under half an hour. They took our names, moved us behind tape, and shut down the whole building. A uniformed officer stood at the stairs with a clipboard. The detectives went room to room first, then a forensics team came in with cases and lights. One of them asked me to show exactly where I'd found it, and I pointed through the open bathroom door of 217 without crossing the threshold. They photographed the vent, the pipe, the floor grime, even my footprints to understand where I'd been. Then they bagged the clip and sealed it. Over the next few days, they went over that room piece by piece. They lifted the mattress frame and found a small sneaker wedged under one slat near the broken bed. It was dirty and stiff, like it had been kicked under and left. A tech slid a hand behind the vanity and pulled out a worn backpack with faded initials, E.T., ink bled out by moisture. You could read it if you squinted. Nobody cheered. They just tagged it and called for another set of photos. Uncle Mark kept the crew off the second floor, no argument. He told the developer there would be delays, and the developer said fine, just keep me updated. Testing came back fast. The clip, the backpack, the sneaker, Emily Thompson. The detectives told us in person because we were the ones who found the room. "It's the first solid lead in 7 years," one of them said. The media got it the same day. Vans parked by the fence line with satellite dishes and hot lights. A reporter tried to stop me in the parking lot, and my uncle lifted a hand and said, "No interviews." He's a kid. Emily's parents stood with the sheriff for a small statement. I didn't get close. From where I stood, Emily's dad folded and unfolded a paper like he needed something to hold. Police combed the entire motel and the property around it. They checked the roof, crawl spaces, the laundry room, the office, the space behind the ice machine. They pulled old maintenance logs. They went through every storage closet and anything that locked. Outside, they mapped the lot and the trash enclosure and the ditch by the road. They questioned the former owner, the manager, the housekeepers who were still in town, anyone who rented long-term back in 2010. They pulled utility records to see which rooms were used the most. The answer was 217, 216, 219, cheap rooms away from the front desk. Emily's body was never found. Detectives told us what made sense. Someone kept her there for a period and then moved her. The timeline fit too well. She went missing in 2010, and the motel stayed open for 3 more years before the bankruptcy and the vacancy. The room had a vent big enough for sound to carry, but not big enough to fit a person, and the curtains faced the back lot where nobody parked unless they were hiding a car. They thought the person used different names and cash. None of that proved who. The case had new momentum for a while. More tips, more interviews. The sheriff brought in help from the state and set up a small task group, or that's what the paper said. But weeks passed and then months, and nothing broke open. Eventually the tape came down, and the property changed hands again, and we got a new start date to finish the demo. The second time I walked back into 217, the floor was just floor. We took the building down in sections and hauled it out. By winter, the lot was flat gravel with a sign promising something that still hasn't been built. I still see Chloe sometimes, 20-something now, quiet, steady. She told me she became a psychologist and works with families of missing kids, which sounded both right and impossible at the same time. We talked outside a grocery and she said, "I tell parents to make space for 2 truths, hope and the need to keep living." I nodded and didn't know what to say that wasn't useless. Every time I drive past the empty lot where the motel stood, I think about the pink clip, about what happened to a 10-year-old girl in that room, and why nobody ever found where she went after. I was 19 and thought Tyler was the love of my life, though now I understand I was just a naive girl with low self-esteem. We met in high school. I wasn't popular, and he was one of those guys who always found a way around the rules and seemed interesting. Tyler had an addiction, but not to drugs. He played poker, made sports bets, lost money in underground casinos, and it ate up everything we had. I dropped out of college after first semester and got a job bartending at a bar on the outskirts, worked evenings and nights, brought home tips and wages, and Tyler would blow it all in a weekend at some gambling dens where his older buddies took him. We rented a cheap apartment. His parents refused to help him. Mine didn't want to talk to me after I moved out from them, and I felt trapped but didn't know how to get out. I started keeping a notebook of bills because the numbers kept slipping in my head. When tips were good, I bought groceries. When they were bad, I pretended I wasn't hungry. I told myself I was building something with him. Mostly, I was avoiding the embarrassment of going home and admitting I'd messed up. That night I'm telling you about was a Friday, end of the month, and I needed to make at least $100 for rent because Tyler had lost the last of our money the week before. I worked until closing, until 2 a.m., and was alone in the bar with the manager Carl, who was locking up the register. Around 1 a.m., a guy came in I'd never seen before, young, about 25, in a leather jacket with a casual smile, ordered whiskey, and started chatting with me. He called himself Jason, said he was new in town, worked construction, and was bored. We talked for about 10 minutes. He was pretty polite, ordered another whiskey, left me a $20 tip, which was generous. When he was leaving, he asked if I wanted to make some extra money. His friends were throwing a private party tomorrow night at a country house. They needed a bartender for a couple hours, paying $300 cash. I was immediately suspicious because it sounded too good, but he said it was all legal. Just rich guys didn't want to hire an agency, and gave me a business card with an address and time. Tomorrow at 10 p.m. Carl watched me slip the card into my apron and muttered, "If you go, text me when you get there. If anything feels off, leave." That's how Carl talks. Short, practical. I nodded like I'd already decided, but I hadn't. I came home. Tyler was asleep on the couch. I lay down next to him and thought for a long time whether I should go to this party. On one hand, $300 would solve our problems for a month. On the other hand, it all looked suspicious. I stared at the ceiling and kept hearing Carl's voice in my head. Country house, cash, private party. I barely slept. In the morning, I told Tyler and he said it was a great idea, that his buddy Marcus knew this Jason and could confirm he was a normal guy. That surprised me, but I thought if Marcus knew him, maybe everything was okay. I asked how Marcus would know him, and Tyler just shrugged, said their circles overlap. He texted Marcus. 10 minutes later, Tyler held up his phone like proof. "Yeah, Jason's cool," he said. "Concrete crew." Chill. It shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did. Marcus wasn't exactly trustworthy, but he wasn't dumb about people who could burn him. Saturday afternoon, I messaged Carl that I'd take it. He sent back, "Send pin when you arrive." I packed a small bag with a wine key, bar blade, notepad, hair ties, and sanitizer. I put on a black dress because it looked clean and neutral, flats because I'd be on my feet, and a jacket in case I had to park far. Tyler told me to smile and sell the top shelf like it's holy water. I said I was pouring, not performing. He grinned and said, "Either way, get the money." He didn't offer to come. I didn't ask. It felt smarter to keep him away from anything that involved cash and strangers. Saturday evening, I put on a black dress, grabbed a bag with bar tools, and drove to the address. It really was a country house, big, 2-story, stood at the end of an empty road among trees. I parked, texted Carl the pin and a photo of the gate, and went inside. There were about 20 people, music, alcohol, everything looked like a regular party. And Jason met me, showed me where the bar was, and I started working. About an hour later, when I was pouring cocktails, one of the guests came up to me, older than the others, about 35, and said he wanted to make a special order. Poker tournament on the second floor, needed to bring them drinks and snacks. I agreed, grabbed a tray and went upstairs. There really was poker, 5 people sitting at a table playing for big money, stacks of cash lying on the table. One of the players turned to me and I recognized Tyler. He was sitting at the table with a pile of chips in front of him and was clearly winning, smiling, drinking whiskey. And Marcus was sitting next to him. I froze with the tray in my hands, and Tyler looked at me with an expression like I'd ruined his evening. "Seriously?" he said, like I'd crashed a date. I put the drinks on the table and walked out, went downstairs, grabbed my bag and headed for the exit. But Jason stopped me and asked where I was going. "Home," I said. "I'm done." He put his hand on the door frame but didn't touch me. "We agreed on a night rate," he said. I told him he hadn't said anything about a poker game, hadn't said my boyfriend would be upstairs. He shrugged and said, "It's a party. People play cards." Then he tried the carrot. "Do 2 rounds up there and I'll make sure you get the full 300. I said no. "Pay me for the hour and I'll go." He stared, recalculating. "That's not how this works. You were hired for the night. I was hired to pour, not to subsidize him," I said, and put the tray on the bar so he could see I wasn't taking anything. He told me to return his float. I opened the drawer, counted the bills I'd used for change, slid them over and said, "I'm not stealing from you." He shifted his weight to block me. "If you walk, you get nothing." "Keep it," I said. He held my eyes, then stepped aside. Someone yelled for beers. I didn't stop. Outside, 2 guys were smoking and watched me pass like they were waiting to see if I'd turn around. I got in my car, locked the doors, texted Carl that I was leaving, and pulled away. Half a mile down the road, Tyler texted, "Where'd you go?" "I'm up." Then, "Don't be dramatic." I flipped the phone face down and drove. I said I was leaving because I realized it was a trap. They brought me here so Tyler could play, and I'd earn money he'd immediately lose. Jason tried to hold me back, said I hadn't worked off my 300 yet, but I just walked out, got in my car, and drove away. When I got home, I packed my things while Tyler wasn't there and left to stay with a friend. The next day, I came back for the rest of my stuff when Tyler was at work and never saw him again. I found out later that night he lost everything he'd won and still owed Marcus several thousand. That party was my wake-up call. I realized I was being used, and that Tyler and his friends thought it was normal to bring me there under the guise of a side gig so he could play poker. After that, I went back to college, got a normal job, and never again dated guys who can't control their addictions. I parked 2 streets over from our building and took the back stairs. Inside, the apartment looked the same, but I noticed what was gone. His duffel, the watch he liked to flash when he was winning, the jar of change. I pulled a bag from the closet and packed clothes, IDs, the notebook with bills, my tip stash, and the old laptop. I left anything that would start a fight later. Leah opened her door in pajama pants, moved a pile of laundry off the couch, and said, "You can stay." I asked to hide my car behind her building. She handed me a spare fob and didn't push for details. I slept badly, but I didn't go back. The next morning I returned when I knew Tyler would be at work. I boxed the rest, wiped the counters, left the keys on the hook. My hands were steady until the lock clicked. Then they shook. A mutual told me Marcus had fronted Tyler the buy-in and wanted it back with extra. Tyler tried to double up after I left and lost it hand by hand. I blocked his number after 3 texts. "Where are you? Come back. Need a ride." Carl gave me more shifts. I registered for classes again. It wasn't easy, but it was simple, and simple was enough. Only when I saw her car still sitting in the far lot at 7 in the morning, I realized that no sick child had ever existed. But I'll start from the beginning. I worked as a cashier at a small gas station off Highway 84, with only bulletproof glass and a slot for cash between me and whoever walked up. Midnight to 8 was usually quiet. A few truckers for coffee, a couple of people for cigarettes, the random lost tourist who swore they'd only missed one exit. At 3 in the morning, a woman around 40 came up to the window. Nice leather jacket, hair pinned back, the kind of watch you don't buy at a kiosk. She talked fast, short breaths, and kept pointing toward the far edge of the lot where our lights don't reach. She said her daughter was in the car with a high fever, the engine wouldn't turn over, and she needed help to push it closer to the building. "It's right there," she said. "Just a second, please." I can't leave her alone. I told her I couldn't step out. Company policy and common sense. I said I could call a tow truck or an ambulance. She switched like a light. The please was gone. Her voice jumped a few notches and she slapped the glass. "She's getting worse every minute," she said. "You can do this in 30 seconds. Be a human being." She angled herself so I'd look where she was pointing. "Right there, black SUV. If your kid is burning up, you don't argue with an ambulance. That's what snagged me." I repeated that I'd call, already picking up the phone. She stared at it like it was an insult. "No thank you, no fine. Just a sharp turn," and she walked away into the dark corner. I watched her go. She didn't get into any car I could see. The jacket disappeared, and I was looking at the dead space where our cameras always show static. For the next hour, I kept circling the same thought. I checked the dome cameras, then the side window, then went back to pretending to stock gum so I could watch the lot without being obvious. The black SUV sat where the lights dropped off. No interior glow or door movement. The pumps were empty. A couple of trucks rolled through and ignored it. I kept thinking about how she said, "Be a human being," like she was reading a line that had worked before. Twice I almost called the police. I even got as far as imagining the report number and what the officer would ask me. "What's the emergency?" I'd say, "A woman asked me to step into a dark corner and I didn't." I put the phone back down. I told myself if she returned, I'd dial, and if someone I trusted showed before shift change, I'd ask them to look on their way out. At 6, Jerry showed up. First coffee of the day, same lid, same joke about the weather. I told him what happened and asked if he could check the SUV on his way out. He gave a little shrug. "Sure. You want me to bang on the window?" I said, "Just look. Don't touch anything." He paid, walked out, and eased his truck toward the far edge. From the register, I watched him in the glass until the angle lost him, then flipped to the back monitor for the other view. He was gone maybe 2 minutes. He came back inside with the same coffee and a different face. Not scared, not heroic. Just settled. "No one in there," he said. "Doors are locked. No lights, no car seat, nothing on the mirror. Tires look fine. I didn't see jumper cables or a popped hood." I asked if he was sure. He nodded. "Yeah, if there's a kid, she's not in that car." He added, "You want me to call someone?" I told him no, thanks, and he headed out for work. I tried to make sense of it. Maybe someone picked her up, maybe I misunderstood, maybe I'm paranoid. I stared at the phone and kept watching the corner. When the morning shift came in at 8, I told my coworker Mark what happened. He didn't laugh or roll his eyes. He just said, "Okay, let's look," and grabbed the manager key for the back office. We pulled up the cameras for the night. On the screen, she arrived alone around 2:30, parked in the dead zone between the poles, and sat there for maybe a minute before walking up to my window. We clicked forward. After I turned her down, she went back to the SUV, opened the driver door, and just sat there facing the store. No one got in or out. No kid. No movement in the back seat. Nothing shifting around. We scrubbed through the timeline. Every time a car pulled in for gas, she stayed still. It was like she wasn't waiting for a jump or a tow. She was watching the building. Mark wrote down the plate number and called it in. He gave a short version to the dispatcher and looked at me while he talked, like he was checking my reaction. I didn't add anything. There wasn't anything to add. When he hung up, he told me, "They'll send a unit by. You should clock out. If they want a statement, they'll call." He wasn't being dismissive. That's just how he is. Steps 1, 2, 3. He told me to go home and sleep. I packed up slow, 'cause leaving felt like turning my back on something I should keep an eye on. At 8:30, I pulled my car around the side to exit. The black SUV was still there in the same spot. No tow, no officer, no woman. I paused at the edge of the lot with my blinker on and stared at it, trying to decide if I should stop. I didn't. I drove to the light and went home because that's what my boss would have told me to do, and because I was already over my shift. 2 days later, I got a call to come in early to meet an officer. The SUV had been found abandoned in the same lot, like it had been glued to that corner. The police ran the plate. The registered owner was a woman from a town about 50 miles away. She'd reported the car stolen 3 weeks before my shift. That explained the clean tires and the spotless seats, I guess. It didn't explain the woman. The officer asked me to walk him through my night. I told him the time, the jacket, what she said, how she pressed me to step out for 30 seconds, how she refused the ambulance, how she walked back into the dark when I mentioned calling. He took notes and kept asking little detail questions. Which hand she used to point, whether I saw keys, if she had a bag, if there was anything on the dash. I told him if there had been a car seat, I would have noticed. We went into the office and he watched the footage with Mark again. The cameras never caught her leaving the property. No footsteps, no door opening elsewhere, no car picking her up. The officer said our angles weren't great and that the dark corner was exactly the kind of blind spot people learn about when they test a place. He didn't say test, exactly. He said, they look for gaps. That word sat wrong in my head. He told us they'd be pulling copies for the case. He asked if anyone else had come to the window after she left. I told him no. The only thing between 3 and 6 was 2 trucks at Pump 4. Before he left, he gave me a card and a short warning. In the last 4 months, there had been a handful of attempts to draw overnight workers off camera. Fast food places, a motel, another gas station off a different exit. Always late, always a sick child or a broken car, always just far enough from the door that the cameras saw nothing helpful. He said several people described a middle-aged woman in expensive clothes as the one who started the conversation. In a couple of those other reports, there were signs someone else was waiting farther out. He didn't try to scare me. He just said, call first. Don't open the door. If they need an ambulance, they won't argue. I think about that every time I start a shift now. I think about the tone she used when she said, be a human being, like I'd already failed some test, and how she sat there staring at the windows for hours while I stocked gum and watched the monitors and pretended it was nothing. The SUV had no child seat and no child, and there I was trying to rationalize a fever that didn't exist. I keep picturing myself stepping outside for those 30 seconds, crossing that black strip of lot where the light doesn't hit, trying to show I'm helpful. I don't get far in that picture. I always stop at the door. About 2 years ago, I had this really weird experience at a movie theater. My boyfriend Ryan and I had been dating for about a year, and we went to movies most weekends. That Saturday, we picked a comedy showing at 10 p.m., the only convenient time. I'm 28, work as a teacher. Ryan's 30, and manages a construction firm. We had errands during the day, so only made it to the late showing. We got to the theater 10 minutes before it started and everything felt normal. We bought popcorn and drinks, scanned our tickets, and went up to the screening room. The theater was almost empty, just a few people scattered across the rows. I remember thinking it was nice not having to fight for seats for once. Ryan joked about finally being on time, even though we were cutting it close. It was the kind of small talk you make when you think the night will be simple. He took the popcorn, and I took the drink so we could carry everything without spilling. I wasn't worried about anything except whether the movie would actually be funny. The place felt safe, bright in the hall and dim but calm inside the room. We picked the middle, the spot we always aim for because the angles are good. He set the popcorn between us and leaned back like he was ready to switch off. The trailers played, then the movie started, and everything was peaceful. About 20 minutes in, I noticed a man enter our theater and sit several rows ahead on the right. He was alone, middle-aged, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood down. He didn't bring snacks, and he didn't seem in a rush to find the plot. The movie continued, but I kept noticing him frequently taking out his phone and looking at it instead of the screen. He'd unlock it, stare for a few seconds, tilt his head like he was matching something, then pocket it. Then he turned around and looked back in our direction several times. It wasn't a quick glance. It felt deliberate, like checking a seat number without a stub. Ryan noticed it too, and whispered that the guy was acting strange. I said maybe he was meeting someone late, but even saying it felt flimsy. When the screen light hit his face, I could see a trimmed beard and tired eyes. The phone came up again, angled low like he didn't want others to notice. I've dealt with parents filming school events, and I hate cameras aimed at me. I tried focusing on the movie, but my attention kept drifting toward that glow. Ryan shifted the popcorn away so we had one less thing to juggle if needed. He whispered, "If he keeps turning around, we should move." I said, "Or we can tell an usher," and then realized I hadn't seen any staff at all. I looked around and counted maybe 6 other people in the whole room. 2 teens in the back laughed at a joke. The rest didn't seem to notice him. The tension was building even though nothing loud was happening on screen. My brain started running contingencies, which is what mine does when something feels off. Ryan kept his tone calm, which helped, but I could see he was alert. 10 minutes later, the man stood up and started climbing the aisle steps, coming straight toward our row. He didn't hurry. He moved with that settled decision people have when they've picked a lane. He stopped at the end of our row, looked at us and said, "Excuse me? Do I know you?" Ryan and I shook our heads no almost at the same time. I added, "No, sorry," because I didn't want it to be rude or confrontational. The man stood there another moment, studying us like he was comparing faces from memory. Then he walked past and sat in the row behind us, not directly back, but at an angle. Ryan and I exchanged looks and neither of us smiled. The situation was getting uncomfortable and I could feel my shoulders creeping up. I kept my eyes on the screen and said, very quietly, that I wanted to leave. Ryan nodded and didn't argue or make a joke about it. He leaned closer and said, "We'll go on the next loud part. Stay on my left." Behind us, I heard a seat creak and the soft sound of a phone case clicking. It could have been anyone, but I took it as my cue to move this along. I tucked my bag strap so it wouldn't snag and checked where the aisle opened. I didn't want to run. I just wanted a straight line and no talking. The movie ramped into a bigger scene with music and a cheap gag. Ryan tapped my knee once, like we'd rehearsed this 100 times. He stood first, picking up the empty tub to look casual instead of panicked. I stood too, keeping my bag tight to my body and my chin down. Ryan stepped into the aisle and waited half a second so I could step beside him. He angled his body so he was between me and the row behind us without making a show of it. He didn't rush, but he didn't hesitate either, and that helped me commit. We stepped forward together, keeping our eyes on the glowing exit sign. I didn't look back because I didn't want to know if he'd stood up too. We stood and headed for the exit. Before we even cleared the end of the row, the man stood too, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment, and followed us into the aisle. Ryan saw him in his peripheral and put a hand on my back to keep me moving. We hit the doorway and pushed through the curtain into the hallway. The sound from the movie dulled, and all I could hear was our steps and his steps keeping pace. We didn't outright run, but it was close. I said, "Stairs," and Ryan nodded, and we cut left. The hall was empty except for a poster stand and a trash can someone had missed. I kept glancing at the wall reflections to track him without looking back. He was there, not rushing, about 15 feet if I had to guess, matching our speed like he didn't want to close the gap until we were out of the room. Down the stairwell. My legs went rubbery from the sudden speed, but I kept going because stopping made no sense. Ryan took the inside rail and I took the outside. That way he was between me and the man if the guy lunged. It wasn't a plan we'd said out loud, it was just obvious. On the first floor there was the small desk where they check bags sometimes and scan late tickets. A security guard was leaning on it, watching the entrance doors. Ryan went straight to him. He didn't puff up or try to make a scene. He just pointed back up the stairs and said, clear and steady, "That man followed us out of our theater and he won't stop." The guard turned, saw the guy coming down, and stepped off the mat to meet him. He raised a hand and said, "Sir, hold up," in that voice people use when they're not asking. The man stopped on the last step, looked between us and the guard, and started talking fast. I caught pieces. Something like he thought he recognized me, something about a mix-up. But I didn't pin it down. I didn't care if he had a story. Ryan angled his body so I had a straight shot to the lobby doors, and he told me, under his breath, "Go." I hesitated 1 second because leaving felt rude. Then I remembered we owed this guy nothing. The guard asked the man for his ticket. The guy shifted like he didn't want to produce it. That was enough for me. We moved. Not a sprint, not dramatic, just quick. Like we had a place to be and this was all a delay. Behind us, I heard the guard say, "Sir, stay right here." And a shorter, muttered reply I couldn't make out. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the glass doors and pushed the bar with my shoulder because my hands were shaking more than I wanted Ryan to see. We left through the doors and didn't stop until we were in the parking lot lights. Ryan asked if I had my keys and said, "Straight to the car, no detours." We got in, locked the doors, and I started the engine. He checked the mirrors like we were merging into traffic, though we were parked. No one came out after us. We drove off and didn't talk for a minute. Then he said he'd been ready to fight if the guy tried anything by the cars. I believed him, and I hated it came up. We never went back to that cinema. Shows in empty rooms feel different now, honestly. You never know who's watching you in the dark. The security footage timestamp read 3:47 a.m. when I saw him for the first time on my laptop screen, calmly eating my sandwich in the communal kitchen like he owned the place. 8 months earlier, I'd switched to freelance programming and rented a permanent desk in this half-empty co-working space in an old business district downtown. The building had 3 floors of open workspace, meeting rooms, a kitchen, and showers for people who worked late. During the day, a few startups operated there, but after 7 p.m., I was usually alone except for Marcus, the security guard who left at midnight. The rent was ridiculously cheap because the owner was trying to fill the building before renovations. I liked the quiet, the space, the fact I could take phone calls at 11 p.m. without anyone giving me a look. But after a few weeks, I started noticing things that didn't add up. Coffee from the communal supply disappeared faster than I drank it, even though everyone kept their stuff in labeled containers. Then sandwiches and yogurt started vanishing from the fridge. I hid a sandwich behind the oat milk like an idiot, and it still vanished. I told myself to drop it, but it wasn't just food. A roll of stamps disappeared from my drawer. A new pack of sticky notes went missing. It felt petty until it didn't. I blamed the day renters at first, figured someone was helping themselves to whatever looked good. One morning, I noticed the men's bathroom shower was damp when I knew it had been dry the night before. The towel hung differently than I'd left it. 2 nights in a row, I heard water running after midnight when no one should have been there. The 3rd night I checked and found the floor wet and a shampoo bottle I didn't recognize sitting in the corner. I wiped it up, tossed the towels in the trash, and the next morning the can had a fresh liner like someone cleaned quietly before leaving. I asked Marcus if anyone came in overnight. He shook his head. Building auto locks at midnight, key card only. I pulled the entry logs myself. After midnight it was my card and that was it. For weeks I told myself I was forgetting things, or Marcus was letting someone in without logging it, which he denied, and honestly, he's not a liar. The coffee level bothered me most because I kept a mental line on the can. Refill Monday, half gone by Wednesday when I'd brewed maybe 4 cups. 2 sandwiches gone in 1 week. I started wondering if I was losing it, or if the building somehow had rats chewing through sealed containers, which makes no sense, but that's where I was. 2 weeks later, a USB thumb drive vanished from my desk. That crossed a line. It held a client repo, no credentials, but still. I re-imaged my laptop, rotated passwords, told the client I'd had a hardware issue, then went over my desk like a crime scene. Trash, carpet edges, under the radiator, even the cracked ceiling tile above my chair. Nothing. I bought a laptop lock and kept my bag hooked under the desk, where the strap touched my knee. I kept working nights because the quiet meant billable progress, but I started doing quick sweeps after midnight. Bathrooms, hallway, stairwell. Nothing out of place. Just that feeling that someone stayed a few minutes ahead of me. Marcus would nod from the lobby, scrolling his phone. "Get some sleep sometime, man," he'd say, and at 12 he'd lock up and wave. A month ago I stayed until 5 a.m. finishing a client project. Walking down to leave, I noticed the door to the mechanical room on the first floor propped open slightly, the keypad door that was always locked. I glanced in and saw an old sleeping bag behind the boiler, some empty food containers, a phone charger plugged into an outlet, its little blue light on. My stomach dropped. Someone was living here. I closed the door quietly and went back upstairs, heart pounding. I sat at my desk and ran through options. Call police and risk being wrong or spooking someone who'd bolt and come back later? Wake Marcus and make it a confrontation with a person I hadn't even seen? Text the owner at 5 a.m.? All of that felt like a bad plan. If someone was desperate enough to sleep in a mechanical room, cornering them at dawn didn't sound smart, and if it was someone dangerous, giving them a heads up sounded worse. I decided to set up a hidden camera in the corner of the communal kitchen. The pantry was where the food kept vanishing, and the hallway angle would catch anyone headed toward the mechanical room. The next day, I bought a cheap motion-activated model that recorded to an SD card and looked like a wall air freshener. I mounted it high above the cabinets, tested it by walking past with a mug, made sure the timestamps matched my laptop. I didn't tell anyone. The plan was simple. Catch whoever was coming in at night, send the clip to the owner, and push for a lock change and a sweep of the building. If it was a broke startup kid crashing, maybe we could handle it quietly. If it was someone worse, I'd have something solid to hand over. 3 days passed with nothing, and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the sleeping bag. I kept checking the SD card and seeing empty frames, lights off, the glowing exit sign, a flicker when the AC kicked on. I started to believe it was Marcus napping between shifts, or a maintenance guy who forgot the keypad code months ago. I almost pulled the camera down. I even drafted an email to the owner and didn't send it because I couldn't prove anything. On the fourth night, the camera captured video at 3:47 a.m. A man in his 30s wearing a wrinkled button-down and jeans walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, took out my sandwich and ate it standing at the counter. He looked tired but completely normal, not like a street homeless person or a junkie. He knew where the plates were, how to work the coffee machine. He washed his dish when he finished, wiped down the counter, and left calmly. I watched the clip twice and then hit play again just to make sure I wasn't inventing details. Same thing every time. Casual, practiced, like muscle memory. I watched the footage 5 times trying to figure out who he was. I paused on his face, the half-grown beard, the way he checked the sink like he'd done it 100 times. He wasn't nervous, and he didn't even look around. He poured coffee, stirred it, and waited like he had all night. It felt wrong that someone could move that confidently. The next day, I came in early and showed Marcus the video. "No way." "That's Evan," he said halfway through, going pale. I asked who Evan was, and Marcus told me he was the building's former IT administrator, fired 4 months ago after a blow-up with the owner over budgets and access. "I thought he moved," Marcus said. "He ghosted after HR walked him out." He replayed the clip and shook his head, saying Evan still knew the place. We called the police and Marcus gave dispatch the situation. We didn't touch the mechanical room. I told Marcus about the sleeping bag and the charger, and he locked the lobby doors and stayed up front. I sat at my desk and refreshed the camera app every hour, then every 10 minutes, waiting for a ping. I kept thinking about him moving around while I typed, eating my food like we were co-workers. Police showed up 40 minutes later and went straight to the basement with Marcus. I followed to the stairs and stopped there because I didn't want to be in the way. One officer radioed, then waved us down. In the mechanical room, they found a full setup: a mattress on a pallet, a laptop on a milk crate, clean clothes in bags, a small electric kettle, and a box of tea. A power strip sat behind the boiler with cords and labels. It looked like a workstation, not a camp. One officer asked if anything else was missing besides food. I told him about the USB drive and some office supplies. He wrote it down and pointed at a badge lanyard on a hook. He kept a copy of his electronic key, he said, and he knows the access pads. Marcus explained Evan designed the building security setup when the place opened. Marcus said Evan set up the building's security. He came in after Marcus left at midnight, used the corporate Wi-Fi, showered, ate whatever was around, worked on his laptop, and slept before dawn. He remotely disabled the hallway cameras each night using service accounts. He only missed the kitchen because it ran on a separate circuit the owner added later after a theft complaint. The detective said, minimum 3 months, maybe longer. The owner arrived while they took photos, angry, embarrassed, saying liability over and over. He pressed charges on the spot. 2 days later, detectives called to say they'd picked Evan up at a motel in the suburbs. He still had the lanyard and a backpack with tools, and he didn't fight, just asked for a lawyer. I asked if he'd been near my area. The detective said he had access to everything. The worst part hit me later. He had full access to every room, including the meeting spaces where I sometimes crashed on the couch after long nights. No locks on those doors. I kept replaying nights I conked out at 3 and woke at 6, convinced now that he could have walked in, looked at me, and walked out. It made my skin crawl in a way I can't shake even when I try to rationalize it. I boxed up my stuff that week and told the owner I was done. I work from home now and check all my locks twice before bed.